everybody, welcome back to Live and Learn with Cindy. So I really wanted to talk to you today about something that's heavy on my heart, and that is mental health. So I'm not sure what you think about or what feelings are evoked whenever you hear mental health or mental illness. It varies for everybody, but I do want to say just right off the bat that 1 in 5 Americans is dealing with a mental health issue. So when we talk about mental health overall, it really is a huge issue. It's something that I don't even think that most people can fathom when you think about the overarching implications and how many people are impacted with mental health issues. Something that I really didn't realize, you hear about a stigma around mental health. You hear that various different ways that there's a stigma around mental illness, but I really didn't realize what that meant, really. And the interesting thing about the 1 in 5 Americans with mental health issues is that more than half of people with mental illness don't get help. They don't get help for their illness, right? And that's what it is. It's an illness. So these are not people that are criminals. They're not drug addicts. Even though you can have, comorbid conditions. You can have a mental illness and a substance abuse issue. They're not the same. So that's the first thing that I kind of want to say is that mental health illnesses are not the same as substance abuse issues. They can coexist, and one person can obviously have both, and often do. They are not synonymous, and people with a mental illness have not done anything to have this illness. So it's just like if they were diagnosed with cancer or diabetes, or even different in some ways that some people with those diagnoses, say hypertension, diabetes, stroke, even cancer, they may have done some things in their life that have contributed to that illness. They may not have had the best diet. They may not have exercised. They may be overweight. There may be various things that have contributed to their illness, their physical illness. But still, we treat the illness and we recognize that there is an illness. And I think that mental illness is a lot different. I think that people don't think of it as an actual illness. But this mental illness and physical illness are very, very similar. Both of them require treatment, and both of them need interventions for the person to get better, right? But oftentimes people really avoid or delay getting treatment for mental health issues because they have concerns about the stigma, about being treated differently. They have fears of losing their job. That's because the prejudice and the discrimination against people with mental illness is a huge, huge barrier. Sometimes these things are very subtle, and sometimes it's very obvious. But it doesn't really matter. It's detrimental regardless of the severity of the prejudice. People with mental illness are often marginalized. They're not given the same opportunities as people that don't have mental illnesses. And many people have a negative view about people that have a mental illness. So there's also multiple types of stigmas, right? There's the public stigma, and that's kind of what we were talking about. And that's the discriminatory attitudes that people have against somebody that has mental illness. And then there's that self-stigma, how you feel about yourself. Like, I should be strong enough to handle this, right? Just like, it's just crazy to me that people think that. Because if I had a bone hanging out of my leg, I wouldn't be expected to just power through that, right? Nobody would say, oh, you're strong. You don't need to go to a doctor. You can handle that. But with mental illness, let's say I have depression, it's somehow perceived as a weakness for me to want to seek treatment for that. Or if I have anxiety, oh, you're on anxiety meds. So there's that, there's that perception that if you get treatment that you're weak, that you should be able to handle these things. Why do you have to have therapy? Why do you have to have medication? But that is such an outdated, I don't even know if it was ever in date, to be honest, but it is such a detrimental and just totally non-productive mindset. These illnesses, it's very important that people get treatment. And some of the harmful effects that people have when they're discriminated against and these things are going on is they have a lower self-esteem, right? Often they don't have hope. They don't know how they'll get better because they can't let anybody find out about what's going on. They have increased symptoms a lot of times because if I don't want anybody to know that I'm having a mental illness, then I'm going to be trying to keep people from finding out, which could cause anxiety. Difficulties with relationships because of, preconceived notions. They have difficulties at work because of the same thing. So I think sometimes we just really need to think about what's going on and understand that mental illness, just like physical illness, is just that. It's an illness. What do we do whenever we have any type of physical illness? We go to the doctor. Well, for mental illness, that doctor could be a therapist. It could be a psychologist. It could be a psychiatrist. But whatever interventions are needed to treat that mental illness is warranted for that person. And they shouldn't be felt ashamed, be made to feel ashamed because they need treatment. Or, God forbid, if they need medications. So they shouldn't be ashamed to get medications. And I think one of the things that people feel like a lot of times is, like they're the only ones that are going through this, right? Like everybody else, especially with social media. That's one of the reasons why I thought this was a great venue for me to talk about these things, because let's just face it, everybody's social media looks like they're doing great, right? Everybody's got beautiful kids. They're going on nice vacations. Everybody looks amazing, but that's not real life, right? We all have good days and bad days. Nobody has good days all the time. We all have bad hair days. We have days where, our eyes are puffy, we're a little bloated, who knows, whatever is going on. But the scary thing is we're not allowing people to validate their feelings. We're saying that it's not okay that you feel this way. There was a study that was done. It was a nationwide study in the U.S. In 2020, and I'm sure maybe, the pandemic might have had something to do with this. But this was a national survey of 14 to 22-year-olds, and it found that 90% of teens in that age range were experiencing depression. And when you think about that, that's super scary, right? 14 to 22-year-olds. 90% of them were experiencing signs of depression. So I think when we think about just that alone, we have to really recognize how serious this is and how important it is to be able to talk openly about it, and how we have to recognize that the stigma exists and really start to disband it, make it not okay. Just like so many other things that we've talked about over the years that aren't okay. It doesn't matter how long it's been happening or why it was happening or who was doing it. None of those things are important. The thing that is important is to recognize that it's not okay. And to start now and start working on reducing that stigma. The National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI, is one of the organizations that really helps to create awareness about mental health illnesses and mental health issues across the nation. So some of the things that they suggest are to talk openly about mental health, sharing on social media, not being ashamed, educating yourself and others. So if you have a mental illness, share, educate, help create awareness. Being conscious of what you say. Language matters. It's important the things we say to people. And it's not always about what you say, but sometimes how you say it as well, right? That's important in overall communication about anything. This is no different. One of the things that we really have to continue to do and force our insurance companies and everybody to recognize is, create that equality between physical illness and mental illness. Same thing on, compare how would we treat a diabetic? How would we treat someone with cancer? It's the same kind of thing. This is somebody with depression, somebody with anxiety. It's not a depressed person or an anxious person. It's somebody with this condition. So the condition does not define the person. One of the biggest things is show compassion, right? Compassion for the person with the mental illness and their family. These things impact everybody around us because of a lot of these issues that we're talking about, right? So if we were all just a little bit more open and transparent, we would see that we're not alone. And I say we, because I myself have anxiety. A lot of people don't know that about me, and that's okay. I'm not afraid to say it. I do. I think I've put a lot of pressure on myself over the years. I'm a perfectionist. I'm a workaholic. And, sometimes nurses tend to be that way. We put a lot of focus into our jobs. So, yeah, I have anxiety. But I'm not an anxious person. I'm just a person who gets anxiety. So I have to, learn how to deal with that, because it's not something that necessarily goes away. It's something that I have to manage and live with. So I think being honest about treatment and normalizing mental health treatment. We have to end the stigma of mental health treatment. It is normal to go to the doctor when you have a cold. It's normal to go to the doctor when you have anxiety. It's not something to be ashamed of, and it's not something to be afraid of, and it's not something to be embarrassed about. So we have to be honest about that. Let the media know. So when you see things that are stigmatizing, and stigmatizing language is there, and mental illness is being presented in a negative way, speak out. Let that be known that, hey, this ain't okay. It's not okay to do that. And the biggest thing is if you are one of those five that have the mental illness, one in those five, then choose empowerment over shame. Don't be afraid to say, I am living an empowered life. Yes, I'm a person that has anxiety, but I'm not an anxious person, right? I'm in all kinds of things. I'm a mom. I'm, a friend. I'm a daughter. I'm many, many things, but I'm not defined by anxiety. So I think choosing that empowerment is extremely important. And I think being able to say, hey, this is something that I'm going through, is one of the most important steps to reducing the stigma, because we have to normalize these things as just normal health conditions. Some health conditions are physical, some health conditions are mental, emotional. So I think really recognizing that for what it is one of the first steps to changing the way we look at mental illness in this country. So that's really all I have to say about that today, and I'm so glad that you joined me, and I hope that my words resonated with you, and I want to thank you for coming and visiting me today on my channel, Live and Learn with Cindy, and I hope that I'll see you again real soon. Thanks for living and learning with me.